Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to Talk with Tubbs, a petrolhead's perspective. As always, I'm your host, Tapelo, aka Tubbs, and I'm going to talk you through this podcast that deals with everything motoring. We're going to talk what's new on the market, what's old on the market, what's good on the market, and also what's bad on the market. Then we're also going to delve into some motorsport, but more focused on my favorite form of motorsport, Formula One. We're going to talk driver lineups, what we feel, react, but most of all, I'm trying to give you a petrol head's perspective. Words that come from someone who's as passionate about the industry as anyone I know. So as ever, let me not waste your time. Here we go. Talk with Tubbs is a go. All right then. So we're back with episode 3. All right. I'm going to dive straight in. I said I'm going to try and ignore the Formula One car launches and new liveries and all that type of stuff. Mainly because, like I said in the last podcast, that there's not a lot of value to be taken from that. It's mostly aesthetics, and look, it's hard to talk about aesthetics because it's subjective. So we know the driver lineups for this year and all that type of stuff. So I'm just going to refrain from talking about Formula One up until preseason testing when there really is something to talk about. So for this week, I'm putting myself squarely and focusing on car chat. What's new and what do I really want to talk about in the market? So let's do this properly. We're going to start with the Mercedes C-Class. And now the problem here is I spoke last week about the C-Class, but I was speaking only based on leaks of what the new C-Class is going to be. And now that the new C-Class is out, it's the perfect opportunity for me to do either one of two things. One, I'm going to have to swallow my words. Or two, I'll be vindicated and I'll still continue to bash on the car. Which one is it? Well, it's number 2, because I was vindicated. Like I always say, look, leaks are exactly what you're going to get, just pictures with a poor quality because someone decided to do some shit. I still have this rousing suspicion that these companies have someone who's responsible for leaking the stuff, sort of like to create hype. So we're all waiting for the day these cars get revealed, and then we're all going to make a noise, and then we're all going to give them publicity. That's just how I think it works in my mind. But anywho, let's carry on. So, the C-Class. Look, I need to say this. I don't think the C-Class is a bad car. I really don't. I think it's a good car. And if someone is looking for that sense of luxury in a smaller sized car, I think there's never been a better opportunity than with the current C-Class. There's a reason why the C-Class is dubbed the mini S-Class. It really is the S-Class in a smaller body, in a smaller package. And for that, I cannot fight Mercedes. I cannot bash Mercedes for that. But the S-Class consumer can, because what will be the price premium of an S-Class over a C-Class? That's going to be huge, as it historically always has been. So this is a situation where S-Class consumers are going to feel hard done by. I don't think they'll really care, but there's always the outlier in every situation. So the price premiums is going to be very different. So if you're getting the same tech, the same layout, if similar with slight changes, but essentially you're getting the S-Class in a smaller package, you have to think what that's going to feel like for the eventual buyer of an S-Class, but what also that's going to do to Mercedes sales. Because now, look, there are a lot of cars on the road, and the smaller the package, just the less stress you have when you're on the road. So I can see a potential S-Class buyer opting to get a C-Class just because of that and the price difference. Look, I know people are rich, but people who are rich generally have a way of thinking about money. At least from my perspective, that's how I think people are. You generally want to get a bang for your buck, and the C-Class seems to be that. So the interior, like I always say, the Mercedes interior is going to be great. They'll have all the tech in there and they'll have everything. But I was vindicated when it came to the exterior. And this is the problem I have with what manufacturers do. When manufacturers launch a car, they will launch a car with all the options fitted to it. You'll get an AMG line, you'll get the optional wheels, you'll get the upsized wheels, you'll get the optional paints, you'll get everything that is an option to make the car look at its best. And I feel like this is the situation we got. Those leaks and the subsequent launch of the car, it is a pretty good looking car. But the problem is, not everyone is going to get that car spec'd to the nines. We know how expensive speccing cars from manufacturers can be. You can get a car at a base price of R1,000,000. And the moment you start ticking options, you want this kind of pack, you want this pack, you want that styling, you want that color paint, you want that. You can easily add on another 100, 200,000 Rand onto the existing base price. And I think this is where my gripe with the C-Class tends to be. I'm not a big fan of the shape itself, but I think it is an alright design. The problem is, when it comes to the base spec of the car, it is such a letdown visually. And you kind of want to get all the options on to make it look decent, if not good. So that's why I feel I was vindicated with the C-Class, because I can guarantee you, the moment that base spec comes out, if it hasn't been out, I haven't checked, I only saw the launch pictures, and I assume those will be an AMG line, whatever. It's going to be a different ballgame when it comes to base spec and that thing with all the options. But the biggest problem with the C-Class is going to be the engine configuration. Now, for a C180, C200, C220, it's fine. You're going to get a 4-cylinder, probably 2-liter engine, I think. Look, we know that Mercedes said the whole C-Class range will consist of 4-cylinder engines. The only thing now is the capacity. We get a 1.5, 1.8, 2-liter. I think the biggest one will probably be a 2-liter. Now, that's not that big a problem for anyone who's getting a C180, C200, C220, whatever the case may be, because I think that's meant to be your daily driver, so you don't have that much problems when it comes to engine, when it comes to capacity, when it comes to that package. But the problem is going to be when we get to the AMG cars, when you get to the C43s, the C63s. That's going to be a problem. Now, I know everyone has been ham about this on the internet, on other podcasts, and maybe you're tired of listening to this, but I'm going to put my 2 cents into the chat. We know European standards are crazy right now on downsizing, on limiting engine capacity, on limiting noise, on limiting carbon emissions. And some of that is actually a good thing. We need to protect the world that we're living in. Like I always say, if we don't protect the world, then where are we supposed to drive these cars? See? Everything works. However, my biggest problem is you lose a lot of what makes a C63 a C63 when you're going down to a 4-cylinder engine. Years later in the future, yes, maybe we'll grow to appreciate that, and maybe we'll grow to find it less drastic a result. However, at the moment, let's look at how the downsizing of the AMG engines and packages went down, particularly concentrating on the C63. With the W204 generation, we had a much loved engine, which was the 6.2 liter V8. Everyone loved that engine for sound. We loved the sound of that engine, and that's good. But then we switched evolutions, and the W205 had a 4-liter twin-turbo V8, which I didn't have a problem with. Yes, we're going to miss the sound of that naturally aspirated 6.2, but we got similar performance with a downsized engine, but we still kept some of that V8 sound with the 4-liter. It sounded good, and people loved that. And then we got the introduction of a C43 with a 3-cylinder twin-turbo V6. And that as well was still a good package. That was something that was acceptable to someone who wasn't necessarily looking for a C63, but wanted something more spicy than your run-of-the-mill C200. So that engine was good. And when it came down that the new C63 would go to a 4-cylinder, I and many of you out there wondered, why not just upscale the C43 engine and put that in the 63? Whether you can keep it as a 3-cylinder twin turbo V6, add hybrid technology onto that, and I think that should be easy to achieve the outputs that you're aiming for a new gen 63, right? And they didn't do that. They immediately halved everything from that engine. They halved capacity from 4 liters to 2 liters, and they halved the cylinder numbers from 8 to 4. And they're still saying they're going to add a hybrid tech. Now, what that does is, look, there's no doubt they'll probably get the power that they want to get, and the performance will be there. But as is the case with a lot of these performance cars, what we love about those cars is the experience, it's the sound, it's the visceral nature of owning a performance car. That is what we want from a 63, an M3, an M4, whatever the case may be, right? That is what we cry for. So you've by making that engine smaller, and we know it's going to come with OPF filters, we know it will, you've kind of killed that visceral nature. Not to say the car will be bad, because I firmly believe the car will be good and possibly even great at what it's meant to do, at what it's supposed to be. But those intangibles, those things that we petrol heads get into arguments about, you've lost that in the W206 C63. And I know I'm speaking even before the car is out, but it's been confirmed that it's going to be a 2-liter hybrid. So we know that part at least. So that's my biggest problem. I think I'm not fighting the steps taken. I'm just fighting the approach. I feel like it was too sudden. I feel like it is a jump that proved to be too drastic. It would have been better if it was continuous. If you went from the 4-liter V8 to a 3-liter V6 and maybe keep that V6 for 2 generations, depending, of course, on regulations, on what the government and what organizations are saying, but keep that V6 for maybe 2 generations. But if you move on, maybe move to a lower capacity V6, maybe a 2-liter V6, but just don't immediately half everything. And look, badge prestige will always be a thing. I know Mercedes are going to sell that new C63. I know it. But it has to be said that for the visceral petrol head, for the guy who appreciates sound, for the guy who appreciates all that type of jazz, it seems to be a bit of a letdown. And look, regulations are crazy, and regulations are so difficult on these car manufacturers, especially when countries now are starting to say, in 9 years' time, we won't be accepting any new petrol or diesel powered engines. Are hybrids the future? Definitely, that's the way I see it. But can we not get something that we will love right now as a last hurrah to the internal combustion engine? Can we not get that from Mercedes? Because we've loved the Mercedes V8. AMG was synonymous with V8 engines, you know, so it's a disappointing thing as an enthusiast, but it's something I can understand from a company perspective and from a planning and all that type of stuff. So Mercedes C-Class, what else can I say? Well, now we have the Gordon Murray T50S Niki Lauda. And look, everyone loved what the Gordon Murray T50 stood for. Everyone said it was the perfect incarnation of a driver's car. And that's what Gordon Murray set out to do. He got a lot of engagement, he got a lot of love, and he got a lot of traction based on that car. As we all know, I think it's a 3.5 liter naturally aspirated V12, manual gearbox, central driving position. It was everything that everyone ever wanted ever since the McLaren F1. Keep in mind, Gordon Murray is the guy who designed the F1. So these are very similar, just different technology and slightly different ways to go about this. So everyone wanted a T50. And now he's like, hey guys, guess what? I have a track version called the T50S Niki Lauda. And from pictures alone, it looks great. I won't lie. Yes, it lost the manual gearbox, but of course, if we want to have fun on the track, you kind of can have a manual, but I think for track purposes, a paddle shift gearbox just works better. I'm really not sure what gearbox is going to be in the car, but I know it's got pedals and it's lost the manual gearbox. The problem is, whatever I say about the car, it's something you've probably heard if you've been watching on YouTube, because there's really no driving impressions. It's such a difficult car to respond to because it's so limited and there's really nothing, no driving impressions. It's only what people are saying to Gordon Murray and what Gordon Murray is saying to people. So I'm not going to talk too much about that car because I'll just be regurgitating what you've probably already heard and what I've heard. What I will say, however, I'm a big fan of the design, both the T50 and the T50S. I love what it stands for. As a petrol head, we all want that car that we can have fun in, that car that we can just drive for the sake of driving. And this is why a lot of people a lot of people that can afford it don't have a single car. You want to experience something different on different days. So if the T50 and the T50S is meant to be that, I love the car for that idea alone. The execution, again, I'm a big naturally aspirated fan. So if it has an NA engine, I'm probably going to love it as well. But yeah, I'm not going to go too deep into it because I want to start talking about that car the moment there are driving impressions, if there ever will be. Because like I said, this car is so limited and I think the waiting time is still another year. So before we get that, you'll have to wait, as I will wait as well. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is right now. And now the big car, the big new car that we have is the 128 Ti. Oh, I'm already cringing talking about this because, as you all know, the car was recently launched in South Africa. And as the reactions were coming out from car reviewers, journalists, and all that, it sparked a debate on Twitter that I really don't want to get into. If you want to listen or read about that, just go on Twitter, type 128 Ti in your search box, and you'll see havoc. And I spoke about this in person with people who are on the DriverMod Breakfast run. More on that later in the podcast. But yeah, I'm not going to get into this. I am just going to focus solely on the car as a car. Now, the 128 Ti uses the same 2-liter 4-cylinder engine as the new M135i xDrive. The only difference being it's no longer 4-wheel drive, it's front-wheel driven, and it's meant to rival the hot hatches of this age, namely the Golf GTI. Now, I think this is a good thing for BMW, and here's why. Front-wheel drive hot hatches are getting, they've been popular for a while, and they are proving to be cash cows for whatever manufacturer makes them. We know what the Golf GTI is for Volkswagen. We know what the Audi S3, even though it's not front-wheel drive, but we know what the S3 is for VW. We know what the A35, A45 are for Mercedes-Benz. So why not have BMW capitalize on that market? If you can't afford a 135, here's a 128. If you want a driving experience to a 135, here's a 128. You know what I mean? You're not stepping down that much to now go to a 120 or 118. You've got something that's as comparable in performance to the higher echelon of that class of car for BMW, and you've got something that's in direct competition with what the other brands are making. And I understand BMW saying, listen, we're targeting a GTI, a Golf GTI with this car, because that is the car that reigns supreme in that segment. So look, no one comes into a segment and challenges the people or the manufacturers that are not doing great in that segment. You want to go for the king, you know, you want to go for the guy that's sitting on the throne. So I admire BMW for doing that. As I look at the option, I think it's an attractive option in the segment. I think it's an attractive car, and it's a car to have if you want something different in that segment. As a BMW, I think it will drive great. Most BMWs do anyway. As a package and as something that can be used daily and as something that can be used for the occasional hoon and for the fun factor, I think it will have all that. It's got an engine as comparable with any other of the cars in that class. The power outputs are similar. Yes, maybe people are crying out for a manual gearbox, but we know a lot of companies are straying away from that. And I have to say, the ZF 8-speed is a great gearbox. I won't lie. Trust me, I got an experience of that gearbox this weekend. It's a fantastic gearbox. So I think as a package, it's all there. I read an auto car review just last week, and they were comparing the 120i Ti to a Ford Focus ST and the Megane RS 300. And they did say that the reason why they don't have the Golf 8 GTI was because the press cars were damaged. So yeah, that. But as I read this review, there were parts where the 120i Ti was good, and there were parts where it fell short of its competitors in that comparative review. But here's the kicker. In South Africa, we don't have those competitors. We don't get the Focus ST anymore, nor do we get the Fiesta ST. The Megane RS 300 we get, but that's only limited to 5 cars. So it seems futile to compare a 5-unit car to a car that's going to go into mass production. So in terms of South Africa, you have to compare it to a Golf. What else can you compare it to? You know what I mean? So yeah, I think from what I've read and what I've heard, it's a fairly competent car in that segment. And it's something that should ruffle a few feathers. I won't lie. I think the design is great. I've always thought this new 1 Series looks good from the rear. The front is growing on me, and especially with the red accents and the color combinations that I've seen on some of the spec cars already, it looks good. I think the pricing as well is where this car is proving to be super competitive. I've seen, I haven't spec'd one on a configurator yet, but from people that have, I've seen them spec a car with decent options and options that you would want for something around the 710,000 Rand mark. Yes, that is a lot of money, but that is where cars are today. And before we even know what price the Golf 8 GTI is going to come in locally, I can already assure you that that price for the BMW is really competitive, especially when you look at the past pricing and previous editions of cars in that class. Cars are already going around 640, 650 before options. So if you can get this car and spec it decently around the 700,000 Rand mark, that's already a very competitive car for the segment. So the 128 Ti, something I'm very interested in, and a car that I think will be a cash cow for BMW. I think it will, because if that's the car that allows them to get more money to continue making M3s, M4s, M5s, whatever, have at it, BMW. Make that car, because we know which cars we want in the future. And final topic of this podcast, which is the main topic of this podcast, forget the time allocations of these individual topics, is the DriverMod Breakfast Run. So this was the first breakfast run I've been to ever. Well, except when I have to run to the shops to buy a loaf of bread, but that's a different kind of breakfast run. But this was the first breakfast run that I'd been to, and it was such an interesting opportunity for me, not only to be there, but to be around people that share this passion of mine. My core group of friends, as much as they're interested in Formula One and they're slowly getting into motoring and that kind of stuff, it's a vastly different experience to the people I met this weekend who have grown up with this thing, and this is what they talk about on a daily. This is what they do on a daily. You know what I mean? So it was it was a good experience for me. And personal shout out to Oschaba. Thank you so much for inviting me and actually having me passenger ride in your car. As you all know, I don't have a car, so I miss a lot of opportunities for things such as this. But to have someone who's willing to give you a ride and have you tag along is so cool, because this is exactly the kind of spirit, this is exactly the kind of camaraderie that we hope for in every enthusiast community, not just motoring, but whatever the community is. That's the kind of that's the kind of brotherhood, that's the kind of camaraderie you want. It's kind of why I started the podcast. Like I say, this is a podcast where a petrol head shares their opinion but also shares their experience. So that embodies what not only what Talk with Tubbs is about, but what DriverMod seems to be about. It was the first time I got to meet the guys behind the channel, but it's also the first time I got to meet a lot of the guys I interact with on social media. And you guys were class. And I'm giving this review as someone who's never done this before. So excuse me if I'm sounding too hyped or too excited, because if you've done this multiple times, the effect will generally wear on you, and it depends on the group you go with, how it turns out. So the group I was with, man, such a diverse group of people, such diverse cars that were in the lineup, and such diverse emotion, experience, conversations, and the works. First of all, the route that these guys chose, I wasn't driving. I was passengering in a car. But if I was driving, and this is what everyone who was driving said, what a route that was. I feel like we were on a mini Nürburgring of some sort. You know, we had undulations, we had bumpy roads, we had straights for high speed stuff, we had turns, we had everything. And traffic wasn't that big an issue. Yes, there were a few moments where we were bogged down by 2-3 cars, a lot of bikes on the route, but I got the experience that I'd always hoped a breakfast run would be. Good group of people, a good route, just all around entertainment. And of course, the car spots you have along the way. At our first stop, right? Some guy, look, at our first stop, we get there, there's a 720S. Everyone looks at the 720S and like, nice. A guy pulls up in an Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio with an aftermarket exhaust it shut the whole place down. It shut the whole place down, and forever and a day, I will never forget that Giulia. Never ever. I wish I'd taken more videos of that car, because it looked so good. It sounded so good. Man, I want to be friends with that guy. I really want to be friends with that guy. But yes, the driving was insane. People were being responsible, and the whole event went smoothly. I kept on saying, if you think the ZF 8-speed is a shit gearbox and you'd like a manual, drive an F30 BMW. Yes, the Twitter jokes are coming back. I was in Twitter's fastest 328i. Man, that thing goes. Oh my God. There's a reason why the 3 Series is my dream car. I know I talk about Ferraris. I know I talk about Porsches. I know I talk about this. I know I talk about that. But there's a certain love, respect, admiration, lust that I have for a BMW 3 Series. And I don't care which generation it is, because BMW 3 Series always have this common thread that runs through all of them. I would love that car. My goodness, I need money. Oh, I need money. And that thing is so good. I think the engine combination with that gearbox combination, everything just works. Everything just works. And again, thank you so much to everyone who made it. I know I'm thanking you on behalf of the people that actually planned this thing, but to everyone I met, to everyone I spoke to everyone I interacted with, thank you so much. You guys were great, and I could not have asked for a better first experience of what a supercar not even a supercar, what a breakfast run is about. The camaraderie, the entertainment, the appreciation of whichever car was there. And the cars were diverse. We had a 328i, a 320d, a Corsa 1.4. That thing flies. That Corsa flies. We had a Jeep SRT 8, a BMW X3, I think it was a 30D, can't remember properly now. We had a Fiesta ST that sounded the business. We had a Renault Capture, we had an Audi S3, we had a Golf 7R. Man, you see, such diverse, and every car was appreciated for what it can do. Honestly, I love that experience, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that I'm able to make it to any other supercar or standard car breakfast run, whatever the case may be. I want to be there. I don't know why my mind keeps going to supercars, but I think the sensation of speed does that to you. But yes, I really would like to explore this more. And if, like me, you're a petrol head and you haven't experienced this before, do by all means try and link up with people that are accommodating, people that are willing to give you the experience. If you have your own car, check people out, check what's up on Twitter, check when is another breakfast run, whatever happening, because it's one of the great experiences that every petrol head dreams about. It's why we love cars. It's why we love this community. It's why I sit down every week and I condense my thoughts into a podcast. It is why we drive. And ladies and gentlemen, that's me for this week. That has been Talk with Tubbs, a petrol head's perspective. I hope I get to do this more often. Thank you so much for everyone who's listening. Thank you so much for everyone who gives feedback. As you all know, you can follow me on Twitter at Tubbs_Meriohle, THAPZ_MEREOHLE, Twitter, Instagram, but more importantly, YouTube, Talk with Tubbs. The podcast is going strong. Thank you so much for listening to this. Hope to see you guys soon. That's been me.